Data is everywhere, but making sense out of it now, that's the real challenge. Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be walking through how I created an interactive sales dashboard. Today, we are going to be answering the big question every sales team always have. Is your sales actually going or they just feel that way? I'm going to be breaking down sales performance using YoY analysis, dynamic visuals, and indicators that instantly shows what's working and what is not. We are going to be starting with just a raw sales data, but by the end of this tutorial, we are going to be having an interactive sales performance dashboard that tells a true story of a company's sales health. I know you're very excited to hop right in. Well, I'm very excited too. But before we hop in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and share. Thank you so much for watching.
So this is the dashboard we are going to be recreating, right? So this is the dashboard we are going to be recreating. But before we go ahead to start this working on this project, I would like to explain some things about this dashboard. Now, in this project, we are going to be making use of complex DAX functions to actually achieve some functionalities in this dashboard. Now, when you look over here, you see what we call the YoY indicator. And when you look over here, you see a line chart representing the YoY percentage by year, right? Now, when you look over here, you will see we have the total sales, the previous year sales, and the YoY percentage per year. But now, when we try to analyze this chart here, you will see that this actually shows total sales and previous year sales. Now, when you look at this legend, you will find that the darker pink represents total sales, while the lighter pink represents previous year sales, correct? Now, what you need to understand is that the YoY indicator, the color of the YoY indicator changes, okay, as the value of YoY change in each year. Now, let's go over to this. Now, this particular file, I'm going to be adding it to the description of the tutorial. Now, this particular file contains all the complex DAX functions we are going to be using for this tutorial. So I will also be attaching this particular file as a PDF file in the video description, just in case you're working along or you would want to use these DAX functions in future for your future projects. Now, before we get started on the project, I would like to show you this dashboard I recently created, which I have uploaded to my YouTube channel. Now, this dashboard has over 1,000 views currently. Now, the same data set we are going to be using to work on this dashboard is the same data set we use for this particular dashboard. Now, while working on this dashboard, I can decide to switch things up a little. It may not be exactly the same as this, and I decide to switch this up a little, but we are still going to be achieving the same functionality and the same structure. Now, let's get started. The first thing we have to do, of course, is open up our Power BI. Now, we have successfully opened up our Power BI dashboard. Now, the first thing we have to do is go over to our file, go over to our get data, go over to our CSV. Then this is the data set we are going to be working on. Now, like I mentioned, this data set was the same data set we used on the dashboard I showed you. Now, while working on the data cleaning in this particular project, I may be a bit fast. But in case there are things you do not understand about the data cleaning parts, you can actually revisit the projects I told you about, where I actually gave a thorough explanation of each data cleaning step that I followed. Now, let's go ahead and open this. Now, when we open this data set, it takes us to a preview section. Now, instead of us to go directly to load this data set, we are going to go to transform. That will take us to our Power Query Editor because I want to do some fast data cleaning. Now, the first thing I have to do is I will be removing this particular column. Now, the next thing I have to do is I'll be working on the ship dates and the other dates. Now, why am I working on this ship dates and other dates? Now, the data type for dates is dates, but this is a dates column, but it is showing as a text. Now, we have to change this data type from text to dates, which is the appropriate data type for this column. Now, to do that, all I have is to do is right click, go to change type, click on using locale, then I'll click on dates, then I'll click on United States, English United States. Then I'll click on OK. Now this automatically change our data type to date, which is the appropriate data type for these columns. Now the next thing I want us to do is go ahead and remove the postal code column. Now after removing the postal code column, the next thing I want us to do is confirm that all other data types are in their appropriate data type. That all other columns are in their appropriate data type, which is looking like they are. Now, when we go over to close and apply, and we wait for this to load to our Power BI dashboard. Now, this has successfully loaded into our Power BI dashboard. Now, the first thing I want us to do is go ahead and look at the dashboard we want to recreate. Now, normally, I would want us to go ahead to start calculating our KPI and writing our DAX functions that will help us achieve some functionalities that we made use of in this dashboard. But we are not going to do that. What we are going to be doing is, I want us to first of all achieve the structure of this dashboard before we go into calculating the KPIs and the DAX functions and everything. Now, the first thing I want us to achieve is this particular section of our dashboard. But before we go into that, let me introduce a website that I call Kulos. Now, what does this Kulos website do? This Kudos website is a website that helps me to choose color for my Power BI dashboard projects. Now, in case you're someone that is always confused on which colors to combine when building your Power BI dashboard, this Kudos is the right website for you. Additionally, I'm going to be leaving a link to this Kudos in the description of this video in case you want to actually make use of this website for project. Now, kindly be informed that in case you decide to make use of the pro version of this website using the link that I will be providing in my video description, I might actually aim a little percentage once you purchase the pro version of this dashboard. So I'm going to be saying thank you in advance. Now let's move ahead. Now, the next thing we do is we have to go over to exploit trending palettes. Now, this place takes you to palettes, colors that are actually trending at the moment. Now, as you can see, you have different color palettes. So, this each color palette combines different colors that are suitable to be added together in the design or when creating your dashboard. Now, the major palette I used is this soft pink delight palette. However, I actually combined some other palettes that are actually similar to this soft pink delight palette that I cannot actually remember at the moment. But this was the major color palette I used. Now, the first thing I want us to do is go over to this and copy this palette. Now, we go over to our Power BI dashboard. Now, the first thing I want us to do is I want us to change the color of our canvas, the wallpaper of our canvas. I want us to change this from white to something else. We can always change this back later if I feel like it is not actually giving me what I want. Now, to do that, I will head over to the format panel, then I will head over to wallpaper, then I will head over to color, then I will head over to more colors, and I will paste the code that I copied. Now, this gives us this. However, I feel like this is actually too bright and I wouldn't want to use this. Now, I want us to go over to colors again and I want to select a lighter color. Now, I want to try this out. So I will click on it and copy the code. I will also go over to my Power BI, then I will paste the code and see what it looks like. Also, I do not like this, so I will go over to Pulos again. Now, let's go ahead together and search for a color that I would like. Now, I would like to try this. Now, I will go over to my dashboard and I will also paste it. Now, I think this is actually a bit fair for me. So I'm going to be leaving it at this for now. Now, the next thing I want us to do is to achieve this particular part of our dashboard. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is I will go over to my Power BI dashboard and I'll click on Insert, then I'll click on Shapes, then I'll click on Rectangle, then this will give me the shape here. Now I'm going to resize the shape to suit what I want to achieve. Now I'm going to draw this to the last, then I'll make this a bit wider. Now the next thing I will do is I will go over to my shape, then I will go over to my rounded corners and leave it at 12. Now the next thing I will also do is I will go over to style and I will turn off border. Now the next thing I will do is I will go back to my colors, then I will go back to my soft pink delights, then I will click on this color and copy it to my clipboard. Now the next thing I will do is I will go over to my Power BI, then I will click on color. I will double click on color, then I will click on more colors, then I will paste this. Now this gives me this color here. However, when I actually look at this particular color, I feel like it is not matching the color I have in my Power BI dashboard. Now, what I will do is to get this exact color, because this is the color I wish to work with, what I will do is I will go over to my Power BI dashboard and I will click on File. Then I will open that particular dashboard I previously worked on. So once I have opened up that dashboard, I'm going to click on this shape here. Then I will go to Sky. Then I will go to Color. Then I will go to More. Then I'll copy this color here, then I will go over to my new dashboard. Then I will click on my shape. Then I will go over to style. Then I will go over to color. I go over to more colors. Then I'll paste this color. Now this gives me the exact color I have there. Now the next thing we have to achieve, of course, we have to achieve my image right here. Now to do that, we have to go over to the dashboard. And I feel like I should make this a bit bigger. Then to insert the image, we go over to image, then we go over to downloads, then we search for the image. So this is the image I made use of. So I'm going to click on it and click on open. Now this opens up the image. So what I have to do is simply go ahead and resize this. So after resizing this, I can put it right here. Okay. So I feel like I should make it a bit smaller. So I can make that a bit smaller, make it a bit smaller, then put it right here. Okay. Now the next thing we have to achieve is the my name and my email address. Now to do that, we go over to Power BI, we click on our text box and resize this. Then I can write my name, Precious Benjamin. Then we can simply go over here to change the font to, let's say, Canva, and then we can also go over to effects and turn off background. Then we can also make this smaller and also go over to here and change color to, so I want us to change this to Canva. So we can change color to white. Then we can simply move this over here. Then I can decide to make this a bit bigger. So I can decide to make this 11 and leave it at 11. Now, the next thing I can also do is pick up my text tool and insert my email address. So the email address is given as benkelly951 at gmail.com. Now, I can also go over to this and change it to Canva. Then I can leave it at 10 and go over to effects and turn off background. Now, I can simply make this white and I can simply make this smaller. Then I can move this right here. Now I see that the size is looking too big. Then I can also make it 9. Now I think it looks much better that way. Then I can simply click on three items and go over to my formats, then align to center. So when I align to center, it makes it all over the place. So what I have to do is I can simply decide to make this a bit smaller. Okay, then leave it right here. Then I can simply hold on this and make it also smaller. Then I can also move this down. Then I can also make this a bit shorter. Then I can make this a bit down. Then make this a bit down. So I can hold the three items now and go over to format and say center. And I can also go over to, sorry, I can go over to distribute vertically. Then what I can do is I can take this up, make it go down. Then I can push this up a bit. Can push this up a bit. Then I can also push this up a bit. Okay, so I can just hold on three of them again and align to center. Now this is looking better, right? This is looking better. Or I can simply decide to make this a bit bigger. Can always adjust that later. Then I can decide to click on this tray again, then go over to format and align to center. Or I can simply decide to move this here a bit and make this smaller, and also move this here a bit. Now this is looking better. Now let's go over to our dashboard and know the next thing we have to achieve. Now the next thing we have to achieve is this shape right here. Right? Now to do that, we go over to our dashboard, then we click on insert, then we click on our rectangle, then we can simply click on this. Now I want us to go over to our canvas. So once we go over to our canvas, we pick the color of our canvas, then we go back to our shape, then we go over to style, return of border, then we change color to the color of our canvas. Then we go over to shape. Then we'll make the side rounded. Then we can move it over to here. Okay, we can move it over to here. So we can push it in a bit. Then we leave it at that. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we can simply, okay, we can leave it at that. Then the next thing we have to do is go over to this. Now, the next thing we have to achieve is the icons and all the overview, all the text right here. Now, to do that, we can simply come over here and pick our text button. Then what we have to do is we can simply say overview, overview. Okay. Now we can simply highlight this and change color to Canva for formality. Then we can simply say title, turn of background, and we can also highlight and change color to white. And we can simply keep text at 11. Then we can simply make this smaller. Then we can move this here. Okay. Now I feel like this is looking too small. Then we can make text 12. Okay. Or we can make text 14 and see how that looks. Then the next thing we can also do is make this smaller. Then we can go ahead and copy and paste this. Okay. Then we can go ahead and call this others. Then we can also go ahead and paste it again. Then we can move it down and let's call this support. Support. Then we can also go ahead and paste it again. Then we can move it down and let's call this reporting. Reporting. Then we can also do the same. Go ahead and paste it. Then let's bring it down and let's call this settings, settings. Then we can also go ahead and paste it again. Then let's bring this down over here and let's say logout, logout. Then we can simply highlight on this and make it bold. Okay. Now the next thing we have to achieve are the icons. So I already have the icons downloaded, but if you actually look at the previous video, the the website I use for my icons is flaticons.com, or I also make use of Canva. Now, we'll just go ahead and look for the icons. Okay. Now, the first thing we have there, the first icon we have there is the overview, which is this. So, what we have to do is we go over to insert, then we go over to image, then we go over to my downloads, then we can look for the icon we want to make use of. Now, this is the icon we want to make use of. So, all we have to do is click on it and open it up. Now this opens up the icon. Now we can simply make this smaller. We can simply make this smaller and move it over here. And when making your icons smaller, you use your shift key so they don't actually lose their shape. Now we can actually move this here, okay, and leave it at that. We can simply also make it a bit smaller, okay. So I think we can leave it at that for now. Now, the next thing we have to look for is the orders. Now, we can simply also go over to image. Then we go over to my downloads and search for the shopping carts. Then we can say open. Then we can also format this to suit the size that we want it to be. Okay. While holding our shift key. Then we can move this over to here. Okay. Now, the next thing we also have to do is go ahead to our email, okay? Then we can go ahead to our support icon, all right? Now we click on this and say okay. So the same thing we have been doing for the verse, we go ahead and make it suit the size we want it to be. Then we can go ahead and move it over here. So I think this is looking too big, so we can go ahead and make it smaller also. Now, before we go ahead to start importing the other icons, I want us to click on these three icons, then go over to Formats, then go over to Align, then click on Align Center. Then I also want us to go over to Format, go over to Distribute Horizontally, and go over to Distribute Vertically. Now, I want us to also click on these three icons, and I want us to move them back a bit. Now, the next thing I want us to do is I want us to click on the overview icon and but before we click on the overview text, I want us to make this smaller. Then now I want us to click on the overview icon and the overview text, and let's go over to format and go over to align and click on align middle. Then we can also go over to the shopping cart icon. Then also for the others, we can also make it smaller. Okay, we can make that smaller. Then for this, we click on this two and go over to format, go over to align and say middle. Now for this support, we can also click on support and the icon, go over to align, go over to middle. Now we can take reporting down a bit. Then we can also take our settings down a bit. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to do is go over to insert, then go over to image, then we go over to my downloads and look for reporting. Now we click on this reporting icon, then we say okay. Then we go over to format it to suit the size we want it to be. Then we'll make it smaller. Then we can move it over here. Now we can click on the reporting. Now we can click on the Now we can click on reporting and reporting icon, go over to format, go over to align, then we can simply say middle. Now we can also click on the four icons, then click on align, format, then go over to center. Then we can also format it horizontally and format it vertically. Okay. Or let's just say Ctrl Z. Okay. So they stay at the middle. So we say Ctrl Z again. Okay. So it stays at the middle that way. Now, the next thing I want us to do is I want us to go over to our insert, then go over to image, then go over to look for our settings icon. Then we click on our setting icons and say OK. Then we also go ahead to resize it to suit the size of our icons. Now we can go over to move this over here. Though this is looking a bit bigger than the other icons, so we can also make it smaller. Then we can move it right here. Okay. Now we can hold on the both setting text and setting icon, then go over to format, then go over to align, then align to middle. Now this is not aligned to middle because we have a lot of spaces between below the setting text. Then we can go over to setting again, click on the setting text, then go over to format, then go over to align, then go over to middle. Now this aligns it perfectly. Now we also have to go over to insert, then let's go over to shapes. Now let's go over to image. Then let's go over to look for our logout icon. Then we say open. Then we can actually resize this to suit what we want to use it for. So we can make this smaller. Then we can move it, sorry. Then we can move it over to here. Okay. Now we can hold all icons. We can hold all icons and say format, align, center. Okay. Now this handles that. Now the next thing I want us to do is hold this two, then go over to format, then go over to align, then go over to middle. Now that handles that. Now we have successfully achieved this particular part of the desktop. Now we have successfully achieved this particular part of the dashboard. Okay. Now another thing I want us to do is I want us to give spaces between this. Okay, so we can go over to move this a bit down. So we go over to move this a bit down. Okay, so we also go over to move this a bit down. Then we go over to move this a bit down. Okay, then we can go over to move this a bit up. So, right. Now we can also go over to back to realign this to middle. Then we can also go over to realign this to middle, to center, no, to middle, please. To middle. We have to control Z first. So we just go over to align it to middle. Then we go over to align this to middle. Then we go over to, so this is a lot of spaces between it. So we can go over to now align to middle. So it aligns perfectly. Then we can also go over to align this to middle. So there are lots of white spaces here too. So we go over now to align to middle. No. So we have to click on this too. Then we align to middle. Then we can also go over to align this to middle. Align to middle. Then we can click on all icons again. Then we can align to center. Okay. Then we can, let's see if we can distribute vertically. Okay. Then let's click on these ones and see if we can distribute vertically too. Okay. Now this makes much sense, right? This makes much sense this way. Now we can also hold this all these icons, and let's make sure we are aligning to center for all. Okay. Now I think this is looking much better. Now the next thing we have to achieve is go over to insert, then go over to image, then go over to, okay, look for this image, then we'll say okay. Now we can go over to resize this to make it smaller and suit what we want to do. Then we can make this smaller. Then we can move this to this place. Okay. Then we can go over to pick our text tool. Then go over to resize the text tool to suit what we want to do. Then we can go over to say dashboard. Okay. Then we can go over to highlight this and let's change text to Canva. And let's go over to effects and let's turn off background. Now let's make this smaller. Okay. So let's make this smaller. Then let's make this shorter. Then we can go over to highlight this and let's go over to make this white. Okay, then we can go over to click on this, then let's move it here. Now white is not giving me what I want it to give me. Then I can go over to make this. So I feel like it's still not giving me what I want it to give me. I want it to pop. So I can go over to look for something that will make it pop. Okay. Then I can go over to click on it and I can go over to make it bold. Right. Then I can also decide to make this a bit smaller. Then I can move it here a bit. Then I can then move the dashboard here a bit. I can still decide to change up the color of that dashboard, but let's just leave it now at that for now. Now let's go over to what we are working on. Now the next thing we have to achieve is I want us to achieve all the shapes right there, all these white shapes that actually holds our visuals. So that's what I want us to achieve, the white spaces that host our visuals. Now to do that, the first thing we have to do is go over to our dashboard, then go over to insert, then go over to shape, then go over to rectangle, then we can move this up here. Now we are trying to achieve the KPI dashboards, the KPI holders, right? Now to do that, we have to make this a bit bigger, okay? Make this a bit bigger, okay? Then I want us to go over to style and let's turn off border. Now the next thing I want us to do is go over to color and make this white. Then I also want us to go over to shadow and let's see if we are going to drop shadow, right? Now the next thing I want us to do is to make this a bit bigger. Then we can go ahead and make this a bit bigger too. Then I want us to go ahead and right click on this. I want us to go ahead and copy this and paste this, right? Now I want us to duplicate this into three because we have three different KPIs. Now this is giving us three different KPIs, right? Now I want us to move this a bit back. Okay, let's move this a bit backward, right? Now I want us to pick this particular. I want us to also paste another of this. Then I want us to go right here, move it a bit here. Then I want us to make it longer. Then I want us to move it to right here, right? Now I also want us to also paste this again. Then I want us to take it here. Then I want us to move it here. Then I want us to bring it down a bit. Then I want us to move it up a bit. Okay. Then I want us to move it down a bit too. Then I want us to go over here, copy this particular shape here, then paste it. And now let's try taking it down. Now this doesn't enter. Now I want us to click on these three KPI cards and let's move it up a bit. Now I also want us to click on this and let's move it up a bit. Now this is looking much better. Now I want us to also see if we can move this down a bit. No, we can't do that. So I want us to click on these three KPI cards and also try moving them up just a little bit. Okay. Now the next thing I want us to do is also click on this and move it a bit up. So there are spaces between this. Now the next thing we can also do is to make this a bit smaller. Okay, we can make this a bit smaller. Okay. Now the next thing we can also do is we can go ahead and remove this particular one. Then we can also make this a bit bigger, a bit bigger. Then we can also go ahead and copy and paste. So we can also go ahead and copy and paste this. Then we can also go ahead to move it down here. Okay. Now this makes much sense, right? Then we can simply go ahead and move this down a bit. Okay. Then we can simply go ahead and click on these three KPI cards and let's try moving them down a bit. Now I feel like the shadow we added is making this look weird to me. So I would like us to go ahead and turn off shadow for all. So let's go over to style and let's turn off shadow. Now let's go over to style and let's go over to shape and let's make rounded to be 7. Okay. Now I feel like this is not actually giving me what I want. So I want us to also click on all of these and let's make rounded 10. Let's make it 9. Okay. Then we can simply go over to this and make this a bit smaller. Then we can simply go over to this and make this a bit shorter, right? Then we can simply remove this. We can simply remove this. Then we can simply copy and paste this. Okay. Then we can also paste this. Okay. Now this is looking much better. Now this is looking much better, right? The next thing I want us to do is go ahead and make this a bit smaller, right? Then the next thing I want us to do is go ahead and remove this. Then we can make this a bit longer. Then we can copy and paste this and move this down a bit. Okay. Now this is making us have a lot of spaces between our visuals. Then I can also decide to make this a bit bigger. Then also copy this and paste it. Then move this down a bit. Okay. Now the next thing I can do is go ahead to click on this, then give a space between this, okay? Or just move it out of that a bit. Then I can simply make this a bit longer, right? Then I can also decide to remove this and make this a bit bold. Then copy this, paste it, and take this down a bit. Okay. Now this is looking much better to me this way. Now the next thing I want us to go over to is to start calculating our KPIs. The first KPI I want us to calculate is of course our total sales. Now to calculate our total sales, we go over to home, then we go over to new measure, then we go over to, then once that opens up, we say total sales. So we say total sales is equals to the sum of sales. So we look for sales and say the sum of sales. So we close this and we say okay. Now the next thing we have to calculate is also go over to our home. Then we go over to our new measure. So the next thing we have to calculate is our average discount. Now to calculate our average discount, we make use of, we say average, then we look for the discount column. So we say average discount, then we close that and we say okay. Now the next thing we have to calculate is the order count. And to calculate the order count, we say new measure and we say order count is equal to count rows. Then we say count rows of our data sets. Okay. Then we close that and we say okay. Now the next KPI I want us to calculate is our total profits. Now to calculate our total profit, we say total profit is equals to sum of total profits. So let's look for our profit column and let's click on this, let's close this and let's say okay. Now we have successfully calculated our KPIs. The next thing we have to go into is building our dashboard. But before we go ahead to build our dashboard, there's some other things I want us to calculate. Now, to do that, the first column I want us to create is our order year month. Now, let's go over to this. Now, like I said, I'll be leaving this particular file in the video description. Now, this actually has the complex DAX functions we are actually going to be making use of for this project. Now, the first thing I go over, so once we have pasted this here, we go over to say okay, right? Now, what does this other year month sort column do? Now, this other year month sort column in Power BI helps us to sort our dates chronologically. Okay, so it actually helps us to sort our year and month in a chronological order, regardless of our text label. So we go ahead and remove this. Now, the next thing we have to do is I want us to go ahead and work on our date table. Now, why do we need a date table? Now, in this project, we are going to be performing a couple of time intelligence analysis like our YoY percentage and our previous year's sales rates. Now, this date table will actually help us do that. Now we are going to be working with functions like same period last year, previous month, etc. Now, without having a date table, we will be unable to work with such functions. Now, having a date table also helps us to have an accurate time-based aggregation. Without having a date table, when performing time intelligence analysis like YoY percentage and PY cells, Power BI can actually skip our missing dates or group our dates incorrectly. So this date table is actually very important for this project. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be copying this right here. Then we are going to be going over to our Power BI. Now, please note that this is a table, not a measure or a column. Let me repeat that. This is a table, not a measure or a column. So what we have to do is we have to go over to our modeling, then go to new table, then we go over to paste this here, and we can go over to OK this. Now this creates our date table. Now, as you can see, it has successfully created our date table. Now, when you click on this drop down, you see all everything pertaining to our dates, like our dates, our month name, month number, month year, sort, year, month, and everything pertaining to our dates. Now, this will actually help us to perform our time intelligence analysis. Now, what you need to know is that this date table was actually created from our order dates. Now, we have to create a relationship between our order dates and our date table in our modeling, but we are going to get to that. But before then, let's go ahead and move ahead. Now, the next thing we have to work on is our previous year sales. Now, what we have to do is simply go over here, copy this, go over to our dashboard, then we go over to our modeling, then we go over to our new column, then we paste this. We can paste this. So once we have pasted this, then we can go over to say OK. Now, the next thing we are going to be working on is our YoY percentage. Now, what we have to do is go over to here, copy this, then go over to our dashboard. Then we simply go over to our new column. Then we paste this and we go over to say OK. Now, the last thing we have to do is our YoY percentage. Okay. Now, what we have to do, of course, the same way is copy this from here. Then we go over to our Power BI, go over to new column. Then we go over to paste this into the new column. Now, this is actually the DAX for the YoY indicator. Now, for this particular circle, you can actually use any visual you want to use. You can actually use a triangle, you can actually use a box, whatever you want to use. But I decided to make use of this. So, this serves as an indicator for the YoY percentage. So, once the YoY percentage is below a certain number, it shows red, and if it is above a certain number, it shows green. Now let's just go ahead and undo this. Now we can go ahead to start calculating our now we can go ahead to start building our dashboard. Now the first thing we have to do is pick our card visual. Okay, so once we pick our card visual, we can simply make this smaller. Okay, now the first thing I want us to show is I want us to go over and show our total sales. So we drag our total sales to the feeds, right? Now I want us to make this a bit bigger so it will be visible. Now let's keep it right here, right? Now the next thing I want us to do is go ahead and format this particular card. Now when you look at this card visual we have here, you see that this is just above this. Okay. Now why this is just like a text on its own. Now to achieve that, what we have to do is go over to our Power BI, then we go over to our visual format visual, then we go over to turn off our label. Now for our core add value, we can go over to make this smaller. Okay, so we can leave this at, let's say, leave it at 35. We can leave this at 35, or let's even leave it at 30, and let's okay that. Now the next thing I want us to do is go over to effects and turn off background. Now the next thing I want us to do is go over to visual, then let's change color to this. Now we can go over to make this smaller, then we can move it right here. Okay. Now the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to copy this and let's go over to paste it. Then we can move it right here and let's go over to this. Let's remove our total sales and let's drag our discount, average discount to that. So let's drag our average discount. Okay, so we drag our average discount to it. So we can simply make this smaller too. Okay, now the next thing we can do is also go ahead to paste this, then go ahead to move this over here. Then we can go ahead to move our order count to it. Then this shows us our order count. Okay, now when you look at this particular total sales, you will see that we have the dollar currency showing just before the 2.3 million. Now, to achieve that, we have to go over to our dashboard. Then we click on our KPI card. Then let's go over to click on our total sales. Then we go over to formats. Then we go over to say currency. Now that shows the dollar sign just before it. Now, the next thing we have to achieve, of course, is we have to achieve the text just showing the KPI name, like the total sales, average discount, and other counts. Now, to do that, we go over to our text button, then we click on it, then we move it over here, then we say total sales. Then we can highlight this and let's make that area and let's make it bold and let's change the color to, first of all, let's turn off background. Okay, so let's turn off background. Then we can change color to something else. So let's change color to, let's change color to dark blue. Okay, then we can make this smaller, then we can make this smaller, then we can move this right here. Okay, we can move this right here, right? Now we can also copy this and paste this. Then we can move this here. Then we can also call this average discount. So we can also paste, then move over here and let's call this order count. Order count. Now we are, it is coming along, right? Now let's go back to our there. Now when you see this, we actually have these bar charts below serving as a trend line, right? So to achieve that, what we have to do is go over to click on our clustered bar charts. Then let's move it down a bit. Now let's drag our total sales to the y-axis, right? And let's drag our order year month to our x-axis. So let's drag that to our x-axis. Okay. Now that gives us the bar chart we have there, right? Now we have to go ahead and format this. Now the first thing we have to do is let's go ahead and go to our format visual. Then we go ahead to turn off y-axis, turn off x-axis. Then we also go ahead to our data labels. Okay, this was already off. Now let's go ahead to our title. Now let's turn off this. Now let's also go ahead to effects. Now let's turn off background. Now let's also go ahead to visual again. Now let's go ahead to visual again. Let's go to our x-axis. Now let's turn off title. Now let's do the same thing for our y-axis. Let's turn off title. Okay. Now this is looking much better, right? Now, one thing we have to do again is go ahead to our filter. Let's apply filter to that and let's say top N. Now let's say top. Let's say what we want to show in the bar chart is top 10. So we simply say top 10. Okay. Then we can simply go down to, so we can simply say top 10, right? Then we can simply go down to drag our other year month sort to our value column. Then we can simply apply. Now this shows the top 10 of our total sales. Okay. Now we can simply go ahead and make this smaller and let's put it right here. We can also make it smaller and also make it smaller this way. Okay. So that was how we achieved the bar charts right there. Now the next thing we have to do is we can simply go ahead and change the color of the column. Now to do that, we go ahead to default and I would like to use something lighter, then I can leave it at this. Okay, for now. Now the next thing we have to do is I can simply go ahead and copy and paste this. Now then I can move this over here. Okay. Now I can move this over here, right? Then I think this is looking too up. Then I can take it down a bit for uniformity. I can also take it down more. Then what I have to do here is go over to my y-axis, eliminate my total sales, and move my average discount to it. So what I have to do is move my average discount to the y cells. Okay. Now I can simply go ahead and make this smaller, right? Now I can simply also go ahead and copy this and paste this. Then I can simply move this down right here. Okay. Now, once I've moved this down right here, the next thing I can do is also go over to my y-axis, eliminate my total sales, and move in my other count to it. So all I have to do is look for the other count and move it to the y-axis. Okay. Now, but another thing, I keep asking myself, instead of using my other count, why can't I just use my total sales? Okay. So for here, I will just eliminate this and look for my total profit. So total profit, I think we calculated total profit. So I can move my total profit right here. Okay. Then I can also click on this and eliminate this and move my total profits there, right? Then I can also click on this, okay? I can also click on this, make it smaller. Then I can click on this and move this up a bit, and I can say this is my total profits. Okay, so we will keep adjusting things until it suits what I want us to achieve. But for this, let's just leave this here for now. Now, the next thing I want us to achieve, I want us to achieve the total sales, previous year sales, and YoY percentage by year. Okay. Now, to do that, what we have to do is go over to our dashboard. So once we go over to our dashboard, we click on our clustered column chart. Then we can move this down here. Then we can actually make this size our box. Okay. So we can make it size our box. Then the next thing we can do is we can go ahead to go over to our dates table. right? So once we go over to our date table, we drag our year to our x-axis, okay? Then the next thing we have to do is go over to our total sales, then we drag it to our y-axis. Then we also go over to drag our previous year's sales to our y-axis. Okay. Then the next thing we have to do is also drag our YoY. So we drag our YoY percentage to our tulips. So YoY percentage. Let's drag it to our tulips. Okay. Now this gives us what we were trying to achieve there. Okay. Now, but when you look at this, you will find out that there is something definitely wrong with this visual, right? There is something definitely wrong with this visual. Now let's analyze that. Now, when you look at this, you find out that our YoY percentage is giving us zero across all years. Our YoY percentage is giving us zero across all years. Okay. And that's not what we are trying to achieve. Okay. Now, the reason for that is because we have not actually created a relationship between our date table and our we have not actually created a relationship between our date table and our data sets. Okay, we have not created a relationship between our date table and our sample superstore data set. So we have to go over to our modeling. Okay, then we go over to drag our dates. Okay, to our other dates. Now, this creates a relationship between them. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to do is also go over to our dashboard. Then we click on our date table. Then we mark it as date. So Power BI knows that that is a date table. Okay. So we mark it as date. So Power BI knows it is our date table. Okay. Now, once we automatically mark it as dates, okay, and create the relationship between our date table and our sample superstore data set, you find out that this actually becomes normal. Okay. So as you can see, this is actually now showing the YoY percentage for each year, okay, and also showing the previous year sales for each year, okay. Now we have to go over to start formatting this visual. To do that, we go over to our format visual. Then what we have to do is we go over to our columns. Then we go over to our total sales, and let's make this light pink. Now the next thing we can do is go over to our previous year's sales, and let's make this color. Okay. Now this is actually coming along. Now the next thing we can also do is still on our format visual. Okay. We can go over to our y-axis. Let's turn this off and see. So let's turn this off. Okay, I want this to stay off. Now, the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to our x-axis and see if we can turn this off also. Okay, but I would like to leave that on as it shows the years, right? Now, the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to our y-axis and let's turn off title. Okay, let's turn off title. Okay, no, let's leave that on. Okay. Now, the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to our title and let's make that Canva. Okay. Then we can actually make that appear smaller. Maybe leave it at 10. Okay. Now this is looking much better, right? Now the next thing I want us to achieve is I want us to achieve this right here. So remember, we can always switch things up. Okay. Now I want us to achieve our total sales and previous year's sales. Okay, by category, right? Now to do that, what we have to do is go over to our dashboard and let's pick our stats column charts. Now let's size this to suit our diagram. Okay, our box. Now what we have to do is we go ahead and drag our category to our x-axis. Okay, then we go ahead and drag our total sales to our y-axis. Okay, then we also go ahead to drag our PY cells, that is our previous year's sales, to our y-axis also. So our previous year's sales, previous year's sales. So we drag our previous year's sales to our y-axis also. Now that gives us what we are trying to achieve. Now we can simply go ahead to format our visual. Now to format our visual, we can simply go to our columns, and let's say our previous year's sales should be the stronger pink and our total sales should be the lighter pink. Okay, now we can go ahead to our title, and let's also make this Canva. Okay, and let's also make this 10. Okay, now this is 10 and Canva. Then the next thing we can do is, I think this is looking okay this way. This is looking okay this way. Now let's go over to see what we can do with our legend. Okay, so we can take our legend to the top right. Okay, we can take our legend to the top right, or let's say top middle. Okay, so let's say top right. So we can take our legend to the top right. Then for these two, we can take our legend to the top right. Okay, and let's see how that is looking. Right now, the next thing I want us to work on is our map. Now, to work on our map, we go ahead and click on our shape map. Okay, then we move this to here. So we can simply make this bigger. Okay. Now what we have to do is go ahead and drag our dates to, no, sorry. What we have to do is we have to drag our states. Okay. So this is a map. We're working with location. So we drag our states to it, which shows our location in this data set. So we drag our shape to this. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to add a color saturation, and we are trying to compare total sales for each state. Okay. Now we drag our total sales to color saturation, right? Now the next thing we have to do is go ahead to formatting, right? We go to fill colors. Now we want the minimum color to show something like red, okay? Why the maximum color should show something like green. Now let's say something like green, okay? So let's say something like green, maybe a green. Okay. Now this is what I was trying to achieve. Okay. Where, but I would have loved us to use red or something of this color. So I want us to go to style. Now let's go to more color. Let's copy this and let's go over to this, and let's say general. No, let's go to fill color, and let's say minimum more color. Let's paste this there. Okay. So it can actually say the red ones are the profitable ones, and the one looking like a red are the unprofitable ones. Okay. Now the next thing I want us to do is I want us to go ahead and make this look better. Okay. So we can change the title to Canberra and also make it 10. Okay. Now, the next thing I want us to achieve, of course, is this line charts right here and the indicator. Now, to achieve the line charts, what we have to do is go over to line charts. Then what we have to do is move this here. Then we can make this a bit smaller. Okay. So I want us to also make this a bit smaller. But first, I want us to go over to effects and turn off background. Okay, let's turn off background for this. Then we can simply make this smaller. Okay, can simply make this smaller. Then also I want us to go over to this and let's go over to this and let's add visuals. So what are we going to be adding here? We are going to be dragging our year. So we are going to be dragging our year to our x-axis and our YoY to our y-axis. Okay. Now this shows it, right? So we can also make this wide. We can also make this wide. Okay. Then I can go ahead to effect and let me turn off background. So let me turn off background. Okay. Now let me go over to visual and let me go back to lines. Now let me change the color of line to be green. Okay. So we can change the color of the line to be green. Right. Okay. Now the next thing I can do is I can go ahead and format this. You can go ahead and format this. What is that? So I can go ahead and format general, go ahead to this, then let's say Canva. All right, and let's make it 10, of course, for uniformity, right? Then I can go ahead and turn off y-axis. Okay. Okay, let me just turn on y-axis. So I can just on this too. Okay. Now for this, I can go ahead and turn off this. Then I can also go ahead and turn off this. Okay. Now I can leave it this way. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to visualize my YoY indicator. So now you see that when we go over to our new measure, now let's go to modeling. So when we go over to our new measure, okay, when we paste the DAX function we copied for our YoY percentage, you see here that it is showing that YoY percentage cannot be found. Okay. Now I will tell you the reason why. Now, when we were actually creating our YoY percentage, we actually created it as a column and not a measure. We created it as a column and not a measure. Now, how do you differentiate between a column and a measure? Now, when you see a column, it has something like a grid, a table kind grid. But when it is a measure has something like a calculator. As you can see, these measures now they have a sign of a calculator, but columns actually have signs of grid. Okay. Now, that is how you actually differentiate a measure from a column. Now, because of we created our YoY as a column, not a measure, we would be unable to actually reference it when we are trying to calculate our YoY indicator. Now, when we are performing time intelligence analysis like YoY percentage, the YoY percentage should be a measure and not a column. That way we'll be able to actually reference it when we are trying to create our YoY indicator. Now, what we have to do is this. We have to go over to our YoY percentage. Then let's copy this. So we say Control A and we say Control C. Then we can go back. Then what we have to do is we click here and delete this from our model. Okay. Then we say yes. We delete it from our model, right? Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go over to our modeling, okay? Then we click on new measure, okay? Then we can then paste the code. We copy it. Then we can now say okay. So once we okay that, it simply means that we have successfully created our YoY percentage as a measure. Now, the reason why all this actually went blank, all these visuals went blank, is because they were connected to our YoY percentage, right? Now, what we have to do to make these visuals go back is we have to click on them. Then let's go to our y-axis and let's remove the YoY percentage. Now, we are just going to replace it with this YoY percentage we just created, right? Now, let's go back to this same visual. Then what we have to do for this also is let's go over to our tulips, okay? Then let's remove this. Now let's move this over to here. Okay. Now we have successfully done that. Now the next thing we can do is we can now go ahead to create our YoY indicator. Now to do that, we have to go back to our file. Then let's go ahead and copy the DAX function to create our YoY indicator. Now we are going to go back to our Power BI. Then we are going to go over to modeling. Then we are going to go over to new measure. Then let's go ahead and paste this over there. Now, as you can see, that worked. Okay, as you can see, that worked. Now, you see the challenge we were facing was because we created our YoY percentage as a column, not a measure. And there is no way you can actually reference our YoY indicator, which is a measure, to our column. Now, there is a way to do that, but it is not actually advisable to create YoY percentage as a column instead of a measure, because we are trying to perform time intelligence analysis. So the YoY percentage should be a measure, not a column. So we can go ahead and okay this now. Now, this simply means that we have successfully created our YoY indicator, right? Now, the next thing we have to do is we can simply go ahead and visualize our YoY indicator. Now, how do we do that? We simply go ahead to our card, right? Then let's drag our YoY indicator over to our feet. Now that creates our YoY indicator. Okay, now we can move this over here and let's go over to our format visual and do some formatting. Now I want us to go over to general and let's go over to effect and let's turn off the background. Now the next thing I want us to do is go over to visual, and I would want us to turn off this YoY indicator, but I would also want us to leave it. So we are just going to leave it. So we are going to go over to category label and let's turn this to Canberra. So we turn this to Canberra. Then we can make this a bit smaller, and let's make it 8, right? Or let's make it 10. So it will be a bit visible. Then we can go ahead to bold this. Now we can go ahead to make this smaller. Okay. We can go ahead to make this smaller. We can go ahead to make this smaller. Okay. We are now losing it. So let's make this a bit bigger, right? Now let's draw this down a bit. Okay. Then we can draw this over here a bit. Now let's go ahead and move this over here. Right? Now we can click out. Now this simply means that we have successfully visualized our YoY indicator. But I really don't like the way it is, so I want us to drag it up a bit. And now let's leave it here. Okay. Now I feel like it is actually falling apart. So I want us to click on our map and let's take our map down a little. Now I want us to also click on our line chart and let's make this line chart a bit smaller. Okay. Then we can just take it down a bit. So there will be enough space to accommodate our YoY indicator. Then we can push our YoY indicator down a bit. Now I feel this is making much sense, right? Now, the next thing we will have to do, of course, is achieve the dates we have here, right? Now, for the dates, I made use of chiclet slicers. Now, to install the chiclet slicers, what we have to do is go over to our visual, then we go over to click these 3 dots here, then we click it, then we go over to get more visuals. Now, we go over to search and let's search for let slicer. So this was what I used to visualize the dates. Now we wait for that to load up. So we can go over to add. Now this we have successfully imported the chiclet slicer. Now what we have to do is click on this chiclet slicer. Then we have to drag our year down to the category. Now this was what I did there. Now we have to go ahead to visualize this, or let's go ahead to format this rather. So we have to click on format your visual. Then the first thing I want us to do is go over to general and turn off background. Now we have successfully turned off background, right? Now the next thing I want us to do is go over to visual, and let's go over to general, and let's make this 4. So I want us to make this 4. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we can simply go ahead and make this smaller, right? We can simply go ahead and make this smaller. Now the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to chiclets and see what we can actually do there. Now we can go ahead and make this 11 or 12 or whatsoever, but I want us to leave it at 11. Now the next thing I want us to do is I want us to go over to general, and I would like us to turn off header. Okay. Now the next thing I want us to do is I want us to make this a bit smaller. Now the next thing again is I want us to go over to chiclet also and see which other formatting we can actually do. Now the next thing I want us to do is I want us to go down. Okay. Now I want us to change the color when they hover over. Okay, when they hover over, I want the color to be different. And when selected, I want the color to be different. Now, I will go over to click here, and I will say when selected, I want the color to be light pink, right? And when hovered over, I want the color to be gray. Okay. Now, when unselected, no, let's say when hover over, I want the color to be let's make it, what color can we make it as? Okay, let's say I want the color to be green. So I go over to say green. Okay. So when hovered over, the color is green. Now when unselected, I want it to be grayed out. Right? Now let me make that a lighter gray. Okay. Now this shows that all are unselected. Right? Now I'll go ahead and make outline weights 1. I'll leave it at 1. Okay. Then let's go ahead and see what the outline style does. So let's say rounded. Okay. This makes it more rounded. Now let's say square. Okay. Now I feel like I want to leave it as square. So let's go ahead and move this up right here. Now let's go ahead and play with this to see what this gives us. Now let's go ahead and select 2014. Okay. Now we go ahead and select 2015. Then we go ahead and select, let's deselect 2014, right? Let's deselect 2015. Now let's select 2016. Then we can deselect this. Then let's select 2017. Then we can deselect it. Now, from what I can see here, I think this is working perfectly well, right? Now, the next thing we have to achieve, which is the last thing, is to go to our insert and click on our text box, and let's make this a bit longer, and let's call this sales performance dashboard. Then we can go ahead to highlight this. So let's go over to highlight this and let's turn it to Canva. Now the next thing I want us to do is go over and make this 16. Then we can also go over and turn off the background of the text. Now we can make this smaller. Then we can make this shorter. Then we can go over to this, sorry. Then I want us to move this up. Now this is looking much better. Okay. But I feel like this is looking too small. So let's make it 18. Now let's click on that to see what it gives us. Okay. Now I feel this is looking much better. However, I want us to click on these 3 KPIs. Now let's try moving this down a bit. Now let's click out. Now we can simply go ahead and make this 20. Okay, then we can simply go ahead and make this longer so it stays one line. Now this is looking much better. Okay, now you can see how we can actually work with YoY percentage and how we can actually have a bar chart, okay, between just below our KPIs, right? Now, now we have come to the end of the tutorial. If you have any questions or any addition, please leave. If you have any questions or additions, please leave it in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.